Okay, what is science? And you can look this up, you could Google this, you could get a book out. There's all kinds of different ways to describe science. So I pulled some various answers from different places, from books and the internet, etc. What is science? It's an organized way of gathering and analyzing evidence. It is a way of thinking of the world around us. It's a body of knowledge that scientific studies have gathered over the years. Deals only with the natural world. Collecting and organizing data in an orderly fashion. Looking for patterns or connections. Propose explanation based on facts, based on evidence, not beliefs. Testing explanations, coming up with hypotheses, and running controlled experiments. So science, an organized way of studying the world around us, using facts and running experiments. Well, this particular class is biology. So we're going to be discussing some things about biology. But before that, how do you know who is a scientist? What makes a scientist a scientist? And at this point in the little lecture, why don't you go ahead, grab a piece of paper, and draw a scientist. So if you pause this and you drew your scientist, look at your scientist. Does your scientist have crazy hair? Does your scientist have a lab coat? Does your scientist have a pocket protector with a lot of pens in it? Does your scientist have a lot of beakers and test tubes around him? Does your scientist have goggles on? Is your scientist a female? What makes a scientist? Technically, anyone who asks questions and tries to find answers to those questions is being a scientist. So, if you got up in the morning and your car did not start and you're trying to figure out what the heck happened, you're being a scientist. Maybe you checked the gas tank. Maybe you ran out of gas. Maybe your battery's dead. You have to jump the battery. Okay? You're trying to find answers to the question, why will my car not start? Sitting in math class, trying to solve an algebra problem. You're being a scientist. You're trying to figure out the answer to the problem. Okay, like I said, this is biology. So what is biology? Well, biology is the study of living things. The study of living things. So we're going to be studying about living things in this class. And in order to know what you're going to be studying, you have to know what makes something living. Why are we considered alive, and why are the desks that you're sitting in or the book that you're holding on to not alive? So characteristic of living things. All of these are needed in order for something to be considered alive. Some books will list like maybe just 5 of them, combine them to list 5. Others will have 7 to 8 characteristics. It just depends on how they want to combine and explain these characteristics. So what makes something living? Well, all living things have DNA. DNA is put together to make your chromosomes. Parts of DNA are genes, and genes control who you are. The genes are used to make proteins, and proteins are used to make you who you are. All living things grow and develop. All living things respond to their environment. If you think about it, if you touch something hot, you pull your arm away. You're not going to let it burn you. Plants, the leaves will grow towards the sun. They're responding to their environment. It is cold outside, you shiver, your body's trying to get warm. It is hot, you sweat. Your body's trying to cool itself off. Living things reproduce. Some living things reproduce sexually. Some living things reproduce asexually. Some living things can do both. Sexual reproduction is when like an egg and a sperm come together to form a baby. So you have two separate sex cells coming together to form the zygote, which means a baby. For plants, it's like the egg and the pollen coming together. Asexual reproduction is where one living thing splits and forms two new ones. Or one living thing comes from the original and it's genetically identical. It says here, do plants go through sexual or asexual reproduction? Well, it depends on the plant. Plants go through sexual reproduction. There's the pollen, there's the egg, which is the female part. The pollen will travel to the egg and make the baby, which is the seed. Seeds are baby plants. But there are some plants that if you break off a stem and you put it in water, it'll grow roots, genetically the same as the original one. And there's some that will sprout up through the ground that are coming from the roots that have spread out. Humans, we reproduce sexually. We have an egg and we have a sperm coming together. We cannot reproduce asexually. Bacteria can reproduce sexually. Bacteria can reproduce asexually. Bacteria can exchange DNA to make a new baby that was different than the parent. Bacteria can also just split and make two of itself, and they can do that very rapidly. They do something called mitosis, which is cells splitting into two, which is asexual reproduction for bacteria. Our cells go through mitosis, but it's just making more cells for us. It's not making a whole new human exactly like us. But when bacteria go through mitosis, they're making more of themselves that are genetically the same. All living things need to be homeostatic. Homeostasis. It's your body staying in balance. Your cells need to be in balance. If they're not in balance, there's too much water, not enough water, too much calcium, not enough calcium, too much salt, not enough salt, whatever it is. Maybe you have cells that have been invaded by a virus, cells that have been invaded by a bacteria. Your body's not in balance. Those things should not be there. So then an indication that your cells are not in balance or that your body's not in balance is you become sick and you could possibly die. So being out of balance or not being homeostatic can lead to death. Living things take in materials to make energy. Living things take in material to make energy. As humans, we take in oxygen and glucose. It goes to a part called the mitochondria, and it's going to make energy. Again, humans, animals, take in oxygen and glucose to make energy. So why do we need to breathe in oxygen? It's to make energy. Why do we need to eat glucose, which is a carbohydrate, which is a sugar, to make energy? Without oxygen, without glucose, our cells do not make energy and we die. Oxygen and glucose making energy. And like I just mentioned, glucose is a type of sugar, which are carbohydrates. So you need carbohydrates so your cells can get energy. You need oxygen so your cells can get energy. So are plants living? You betcha. Plants take in oxygen that they made themselves through the process of photosynthesis, and plants take in glucose that they made for themselves. All glucose we take in is from a plant. All oxygen we take in is from a plant. But plants don't make them for us. Plants make those materials for themselves. Plants need oxygen, plants need glucose to make energy. All living things can change over time. All living things are made of cells. Viruses. Viruses do not have a cellular type of material. Viruses are not living. Viruses are not alive. They are not made of cells. They are kind of like a parasite. They actually use our cells to do what they need to do to stay alive. In fact, viruses can change over time. Viruses use our energy. Viruses need to be homeostatic. Viruses can reproduce. Viruses can respond. Viruses can grow and develop. And viruses have DNA. But they are not living because they do not have cells. They don't have that type of structure. We have all kinds of cells. We have parts that do certain things for us that keep us alive. Viruses use our cells to do what they need to do.